After the accident, the doctors needed consent for emergency surgery, but my parents refused. Dad just texted, "Deal with it later, we're occupied." So I contacted Grandpa instead. 4 weeks passed, and I returned holding legal documents. For most of my life, I clung to a childish belief that family meant unconditional love, that no matter what happened, your parents would come running if you called. That illusion shattered at exactly 3:15 a.m., under the relentless white glare of the emergency room at Massachusetts General Hospital. I lay on a gurney, every breath tearing through my ribs like glass. The doctor's words blurred into one terrible sentence: internal bleeding, emergency surgery, anesthesia complications. They needed family consent. Because of a reaction years ago, they couldn't proceed until someone signed off. My hands trembled as I dialed the only numbers that ever should have meant safety. Robert and Linda, my parents. Straight to voicemail, again. Voicemail. My third call ended in a choked whisper of desperation. An hour crawled past, each second scraping against the edge of panic. Then, a message flashed on my cracked phone screen. Greater than Dad. Can't this wait? We're busy meeting with clients. Busy. That word detonated inside me. They were busy while I was bleeding, busy while I begged for them to save me. Have you ever felt yourself dissolve into invisibility? I broke, sobbing so hard that my broken ribs screamed. The pain wasn't from my body. It came from the sharp truth blooming in my chest. I was alone. A nurse, Ben, placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. A social worker, Maria, knelt by my side. "Mabel," she asked softly, "is there anyone else we can call?" I could barely speak. My grandfather. William Carter. Maria disappeared for a few minutes, then returned. "He's on his way," she said, smiling gently. "He said he'll be here in under an hour. He lived 50 miles away, but 47 minutes later, Grandpa William burst through those double doors, 74 years old, still dusted in sawdust from his workshop, his hands, calloused and warm, wrapped around mine. "Oh, Mayab," he whispered, using the nickname he gave me as a little girl. In that one word was more love than I'd felt from my parents in years. He listened to the doctor, asked sharp, calm questions, then signed the consent form without hesitation. As they wheeled me away, he leaned close. "I'll be right here when you wake up, kiddo. Don't you worry." When I opened my eyes hours later, he was still there, slouched in a chair, half asleep, a crossword puzzle on his lap. My protector, my constant. And that sight, his tired, loving face, pulled at something deep inside me. Decades of emotional neglect condensed into one clear understanding. My parents had never truly shown up for me. Robert and Linda, financial advisors from Newton, lived in a condo that looked like a magazine spread. They valued success, not sincerity. When I told them I'd taken a job at a nonprofit, my mother's lips curled into that polite, surgical smile. "That's nice, Mabel, but it doesn't really pay, does it?" My father barely looked up. "When are you going to get serious? You should have gone into finance." When I bought my first car, a beat-up Toyota Corolla, he sighed like it was a tragedy. Everything I was proud of, they reduced to embarrassment. But Grandpa, he clapped his big hands together and said, "You did this on your own, Mayab. That's something to be proud of." He was there when my parents skipped my graduation for a conference in the Bahamas, sitting in the rain, holding daisies. He taught me to shape clay, to paint, to make something out of nothing. "Anything made with love," he'd say, "is worth more than something bought with money." And now, in the moment I nearly died, he was there again. 4 days after my surgery, my parents finally arrived. They looked inconvenienced. My father immediately pulled out his phone. My mother placed a drugstore candy bag on the table. "Well, you look better," she said, scanning the room. "The parking here is just awful." "Mabel," my father added, pacing. "We had to circle for 20 minutes. They stayed 35 minutes. During that time, my mother complained about a client. My father asked, "So when can you get back to work?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Does it hurt?" Just, "When can you be useful again?" When they left, the silence hit harder than any crash. Later, the doctor explained I couldn't manage stairs for 6 weeks. Panic flared. My apartment was on the second floor. Before I could speak, a voice from the corner said, "She's coming home with me." "Grandpa." He'd already built a ramp. He'd been planning for me before I even knew I needed him. Moving into his small, worn home was like breathing clean air for the first time. He cooked, helped me dress, joked through the pain of physical therapy, and yet, at night, I found myself staring at my silent phone, still hoping for a message from the people who left me bleeding. Why? Why did I still crave their crumbs? Then it hit me. Learned helplessness. That term I'd studied once. You endure neglect so long you start to see it as goal. You train yourself to feel grateful for scraps. I wasn't weak. I'd been conditioned. But the training was over. Weeks later, my neighbor Sarah brought over a mountain of mail she'd been collecting. I started sorting through it at Grandpa's kitchen table. Medical bills, insurance letters. Then something strange. Confusing notices from my disability insurance provider. After an hour on hold, a representative finally answered. "Ma'am," he said cautiously, "we've already been in communication with your financial proxies." My, what? Your parents. Robert and Linda. They contacted us 3 days after your accident, inquiring about liquidating your disability fund. Liquidating. I remembered sitting in my father's office 2 years ago, him handing me a pen. "It's standard," he said. "We'll just add your mother and me as proxies. Keeps things tidy. Family portfolio." I'd thought he was helping. I'd thought, maybe, he cared. Now I understood. He'd been setting a trap. My body went cold. I called him immediately. "Why did you try to liquidate my fund?" His voice was calm, almost amused. "Now, Mabel, don't be dramatic. The market's down. We were just restructuring your assets." "Restructuring?" I said quietly. "Or stealing?" He sighed. "The firm is having some cash flow issues, all right? It's temporary. You'll get it back." He wanted to drain the money meant to keep me alive while I couldn't work, to save his business. That wasn't neglect. That was theft. I hung up. My hands shook, not with weakness, but fury. Then I noticed another envelope, a loan rejection letter from a bank I didn't recognize. It was for a home equity line of credit, using my condo as collateral. Application date, 2 days after my accident. My father had co-signed when I bought it. He said it was just a formality. He'd use that to try to drain the equity while I lay in intensive care. The sadness that had followed me my whole life vanished. In its place came clarity, cold, bright, absolute. They weren't just neglectful, they were predators. I showed Grandpa the letter. His expression hardened. He disappeared into his study and returned with a cracked leather address book. "Harrison," he said into the phone. "It's William. My granddaughter's in trouble." Mr. Harrison, a lawyer Grandpa had known for decades, listened patiently as I explained everything: the hospital, the text, the fund, the loan. He was silent for a long time. "Mabel," he said at last, "what they've done isn't just unethical. It's likely criminal. We can fix this. Right now." He drafted a revocation of power of attorney, cease and desist orders, and documents naming Grandpa as my new proxy. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't in years: power. 4 weeks after the crash, I called my parents. "Come to Grandpa's house," I said. "We need to talk." They arrived precisely at 2, irritated, impatient. My father entered first. "Mabel, this is really inconvenient. We have a showing at 3. He froze when he saw the setup. Me in the armchair, Grandpa on one side, Mr. Harrison on the other, briefcase open. "What's going on?" my mother asked, her voice tight. I slid a manila envelope across the table. "These are legal documents. They revoke every power of attorney you hold. You are no longer proxies or beneficiaries on any of my accounts. Effective immediately." My father laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Ungrateful," he barked, standing up. "This is how you repay us? We were trying to protect your assets." "Protect them?" I said softly. "Like you protected me in the hospital? Like when you applied for a home equity loan while I was in surgery?" Silence. My mother's face drained of color. My father sat down hard, speechless. "You don't understand," my mother whispered. "The firm—" "I do understand," I said. "But your failure isn't my burden." They signed, hands shaking, faces pale. Then they left. No goodbyes. The door closed, and for the first time in my life, I exhaled freely. The weeks that followed were quiet, rebuilding weeks. I healed, worked with Mr. Harrison to secure my finances, created new accounts, new passwords, fraud alerts. I sold the condo, the place that had become a battlefield, and moved into a small ground floor apartment with sunlight streaming through the windows. Grandpa built a ramp out front. "Just till you're steady," he said. But I knew he built it to last. When I returned to my nonprofit job, I was not the same woman. I pitched a new initiative, legal and financial advocacy for survivors of medical crises. Because people like me shouldn't have to fight predators while learning to walk again. My boss approved it. And slowly, life filled with warmth again. Last night, I hosted dinner in my new apartment. Grandpa sat at the table teaching Ben, the nurse who'd stayed my friend, how to cheat at cards. Sarah brought a pie. We laughed. I looked around at the mismatched dishes I'd painted myself, the ones Grandpa once called perfectly imperfect, and realized this was family. Real family isn't built from blood. It's built from presence. From who shows up when the world collapses. From who sits with you in the dark and helps you build a ramp when you can't climb the stairs alone. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, listen to me. You are not defined by the love you didn't receive. You are not a supporting character in someone else's story. You are the lead in your own. Letting go of blood ties isn't betrayal, it's salvation. Sometimes the only way to survive is to stop being their victim and start being your own rescuer. That's what I did. And as I looked across that dinner table, surrounded by people who chose me, I knew, after 26 years, I was finally, wholly free.